Peace, power, and love. It's your one and only Kansu Sheshwan. And again, another episode of Team O.S.I.R.I.S. right here on Team O.S.I.R.I.S YouTube channel. And actually, we're here today to discuss or continue a conversation in regards to the mentalism of the African Revolution and try to come to a consensus or solution on maybe this is how we can solve some of our challenges in our quest for liberation. So before I start, my customary opening in my African spiritual system as an African spiritualist. Hold on. Hold on a second. All right. Pretty good, Maduro. Papa Legwood opens the door for all peace, tranquility, and health as we build on knowledge and truth. I have some panelists that are a combination of people that are really intelligent people, man. They build on a lot of sciences and actually have a vast knowledge base. And I wanted to invite them just to have a different perspective. And of course, we have our Team O.S.I.R.I.S members that are here. And so it's imperative that we kind of seek for knowledge and questions. And yesterday, we talked about this to a great deal. And we're going to touch on some more subject matter. What I do want to do, as I did yesterday, I want to set the tone. I want to play some more audio footage from another one of our great elders. This one is a bit longer than the one that was before, but these words are very powerful. And one thing we have to do is to respect our elders in listening. That's an African tradition. The voice is very powerful in African tradition. The voice is extremely effective, more so than the word, but the voice, because it's spirit attached to the voice. And when it's directed in proper intent and love, it can be extremely effective. So this, our elder, is Dr. Amos Wilson, and he talks about the rediscovery of self. So let's listen in on Dr. Wilson as he talks about the rediscovery of self.
They have a criminal history. They have a criminal nation. The nation is built on criminality and murder and exploitation. It is a part of their collective psyche. The United States is a mafia government. No one has done more damage and degradation and murder, rape, and robbery than Europeans. Yes. Therefore, in order to escape confrontation with their true criminal nature, they must accuse others of being criminals. What we call projection. They must become obsessed with the criminality of other people. And black folk become those other people, you see. As Clinton Cox say, you called the Indians savages so you could behave toward them what? Savagely. That's the function of stereotyping. If I call you a criminal, then I can treat you what? Criminally. I don't owe you justice. In fact, shooting you in the street is justice. We know you are already a criminal. Why should we bother to take you to trial? Yes, that's what it is. We're doing a service. We're saving the taxpayers' money. What have we lost? A criminal? What are you complaining about? Yeah, this is the deal. What does it mean then? When you can become, then often people, in order to escape certain problems, become obsessed with other issues to the point where they don't have time or the energy or anything else to think about anything else. They don't see anything else. So I can forget my self-hatred. I can forget my self-alienation if I concentrate on how much I love myself. But this is a bad kind of love, you see. It's not the right kind of love. If I concentrate on what? How great I am. If I concentrate on making other people see what? How great I am. You see? And therefore, my 24 hours a day, I'm obsessed by projecting my what? Greatness. And I will, but that greatness is coming out of what? Hatred and inferiority. And since I'm greater than everyone else, I must make everyone else superior, inferior to me. In fact, I can only love people who attest to my superiority. I can only love a woman who 24 hours a day maintains my superior ego and states that she is in need of leadership and guidance. And I'm her leader. I may be emasculated in the world, but in my house, I'm the king. And at any moment she indicates that I have feet of clay, I shall use them to stomp. Yeah, this is the kind of thing we have here. Yeah, and it goes the other way too. You know, make me a goddess and lay at my feet all kinds of sacrifices. Yeah, live through me. And any moment that you don't hold this up, I'm going to react with anger and call you all kinds of names and problems. That's the issue of narcissism. Then you have the phallic character, flaunts his masculinity through success at work or conquest over women, constantly seeking confirmation of his potency, identifies himself with his penis. Ultimately, though, ladies and gentlemen, this is a man who's afraid of castration, who really thinks his balls have already been cut out from under him. Therefore, he needs a constant confirmation that he has them. Kind of reminds me again of the black and white video. What was that boy trying to grab down there between his legs? Why are so many black men grabbing that all the time? Yes, seeing if it's there. Yeah, where is it? In other words, then, that relationship can move into a master-slave kind of relationship. A relationship that tries to use and exploit other people. A relationship that, in a sense, duplicates the social relationship that the man has. Don't worry about it, they'll be all right. And then you have people then who have a problem with lovability and are in constant need of reassurance. So what does this all imply? We don't have time to go into it all. What does it all imply? What does it roll out to be? It means then that if we have to transform the relationship between black males and black females and transform the nature of black life, period, we must transform the American system itself. Yeah, you can't get around that. Oh yeah, we have to if we are going to say that living in America, being black in America, creates a good deal of the problems that we have, then we must change America as a part of changing what? The problems. Now, it doesn't mean that we focus outside of ourselves, because one of the best ways of changing America is by what means? Changing ourselves. I've told you before that we are not only the creation of rights, we also create them. That they cannot be what they are unless we are what we are. And therefore, if we engage in self-transformation, we engage in the transformation of the nation and ultimately in the transformation of the world. what I'm saying again about an African-centered education, that more deeply than all, in terms of an African-centric education, is that we are not creating a revolution in America as much as we are creating a revolution in ourselves. But that revolution in ourselves is a revolution in America. And that's why we look at ourselves and transform ourselves. It means then that we must gain a perception of what is real. Maladaptive behaviors flow from the inability to operate in terms of what is real in the world. Where are we as African people? What is our real history? What is the real nature of this social system? And how does that reality intrude into our lives? We must come to know ourselves. If we do not know ourselves, we lose control of ourselves. We don't know why and for what reason we behave as we do. We must exercise control over ourselves. We must come to esteem ourselves and accept ourselves. To a good extent, the problems that we talk about all the time are problems that flow from people avoiding themselves, escaping their real selves, and creating mechanisms and machinations to facilitate their escape from themselves, and using other people and abusing other people in their escape from self-acceptance, in their escape from their real African selves as a people. And therefore, if we're going to stop abusing and using other people and using them as objects and so forth, then we must come back into self-acceptance and come back into reality. We must gain the ability to form affectionate relationships. And ladies and gentlemen, the ability to love and how to love is taught. In this system, we're taught that it's something that occurs accidentally and spontaneously. That is not true. Even romantic love, with all of its shivers up and down your spine, and all of this business about you can't eat, and you can't sleep, and you toss and turn all night.
Most definitely, man. Most definitely one of the great elders, Dr. Amos Wilson, that speaks on the rediscovery of the self, how important the rediscovery of self is, and how we are affected by a lot of environmental obstacles that actually prevent us from knowing self and being what would be considered self-centered. Of course, that's put in a negative spin, saying that you only concentrate on self, but self is the all, isn't it? What do you recognize out of self? You can't encompass what another person thinks. You can't feel what they feel, but you know what you feel. And that's very important, being a centered and grounded person. When we talk about the African Revolution, what we're talking about is a sense of understanding who you are within here. And we touched on that yesterday, and I wanted to kind of touch on some things. I wanted to go into the European or Eurasian paradox and how it perpetuates white supremacy. Because once again, I'll say this, and I said it on yesterday's show. White supremacy is a mental construct that gives spark to physical reaction. I'll say that again. White supremacy is a mental construct that gives spark to physical reality. Once your mind is in a certain state, it will create by organic structure a mental and physical action. If you believe what you are, that's what you are. If you're told what you are and you cannot defend yourself psychically, you will be psyched out into being what that person demeans you as, or deems you as, forgive me. Henceforth, demeaning you by taking your culture. Your culture is in here. How you are raised and indoctrinated then permeates your mental. Henceforth, understanding mentalism. And the powerful thing about mentalism is common sense. It's not book sense. Book sense is a construct that's outside of our culture because we dealt in natural relative sense. a common bond with ancestors to descendants. And we use nature and the outside forces to gain knowledge of a thing. It was then modernized in what is called logos from mythos. And the mythos were stories that were told under the guise of being the griot to the tribal members or the ethnic group. And like I mentioned yesterday, Germans and Polish are not the same, but we call them white, but they're not the same. Polish person will not attest to being a German person, so forth and so on. We tend to forget that these are tribes and they are survivalists. So when we start to argue about white supremacy, understand even an African, phenotype and all, would be considered a white supremacist depending upon the mentality. Because the mentality, the mind is going to control the body. Because your perception gives way to physical action. So if we change our mental and understand the common bond through common sense, and we speak a common language, and we understand the terms that are created under white supremacy, we see the inception of racism and bigotry through white supremacy. These are three separate actions: white supremacy, bigotry, and then racism. So these things are perpetuated within your own culture under the guise of double consciousness. And so when you have a double conscious, it's hard for you to choose between the lesser of two evils. So this particular broadcast, I really wanted to focus on education, right? Education. What is education? And this is funny. I'm going to open the panel. We have from my right to your left, the brother Blackstar, peace to the brother O.S.I.R.I.S, the brother D. Miller, the brother James Yehoda, Team O.S.I.R.I.S member, my brother Christopher. We just had the brother Alvin come in, that's on your far right. We had the brother Melvin, the archivist, that's with Team O.S.I.R.I.S. And we have a very wise brother, Hebrew Perry, a brother who I've come to know recently, is a good brother. And I'm going to open the floor to the panel and have them digress. And I appreciate, because of the size of the panel, can you limit your response to about 5 minutes? However, this is my question to the panel as I open the panel. How important is European education to the African Revolution or the African liberation, or whatever you may deem it as an individual? How important is European education? And I open the floor.
Could I respond to that?
Sure.
I like how you phrased that, European education, because that's a phrase that's been tossed around the conscious community, and they don't understand that there's no such thing as black education or European education. It's simply education. You know, it's either your sources check out right or they don't. No matter if it comes from a black person or a white person, Hispanic person, if they're making claims about certain things, you go and research the claim that was made and try to see if you can corroborate it, you know? So I'm not going to say something is not true simply because it's given to me by a white person. I'm going to look at it, see if it's corroborated, I'm going to test it, research it, and then I'm going to make a judgment. So if we're going to say, and that's another thing, European education is just code word for university. So if I go say, hey, I went to a university, and I majored in history or in science, and then if I talk about the stuff that I learned at the university, people will say, well, that's white man education, that's white man history, that's white man science, while the person telling me that has no discipline whatsoever in academia at all. So I think education period is important, whether it comes to by the hands of white people or black people, because education doesn't have a skin color. It's simply, it's either right or it's wrong. It's as simple as that. And if it doesn't check out, then it's pseudo. And if it does, then it's correct. And it doesn't matter what you. People focus more on the person that's giving it to you other than the actual thing that they gave to you. That's what you're trying to determine what's true or false. So if we're going to talk about European education, sure, the European has really been the gatekeepers as far as history, science, and all these things because they never went through slavery. So by default, they're going to have access to these things that we don't. Point, we basically have to look at what they got, examine it and study it, don't take it at face value, and then come up with our conclusions based off looking at it instead of just dismissing it because it's coming from a white person.
Okay, well said, bro. Well said.
Yeah, I do agree with Alvin. He does have a point, but for sake of colloquial
Not for
understanding,
nothing, not for nothing, Melvin. But I think the brother said O.S.I.R.I.S was next.
No,
you
I,
did?
I didn't have a particular order. It doesn't matter. Whoever's on.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I do agree with Alvin. He has a very solid point. But for the sake of colloquial terms, I'll say this: especially being in America, having information or education from various aspects is always going to be helpful to progressing yourself, your family, as well as your people throughout the future. So you want to have various different aspects of education and information. So I do agree that all information in education, regardless of the ethnic group that it's attached to, is important. I just think that learning whether you can use it right away and whether it's not really applicable is the difference. A lot of people, they try to apply everything that they get, and they end up going down the path to where nothing gets applied. And I think you have to actually see what fits you. Take it all in, try to understand it, see what fits you, see what you're able to apply, and the rest, you just leave it in the bag and keep it going. But for the base point that I'm trying to make, I do agree with Alvin.
I say, bro. And any other input on that? Floor is open.
Peace, Consul. This is Brother Chris. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with what Alvin was saying. There's not like, what does that even mean? Like European education. I mean, if you look at people like in China, the universities and schools in China, they're excelling. As a country. You go look at Japan. They're doing the same. So that whole thing doesn't make any sense because the information, if it's correct, it can be tested over and over and over again, and it can be used to benefit humanity. Or like if a person is Hispanic, and they can show me, hey, this is how you grow food, I'm not going to disagree with that because of the skin complexion of this individual. So I mean, that's I agree with Alvin on that.
Yes, sir. Floor is open.
Is that it? Nobody else want to respond to that question that's on the floor? Just Melvin and
Well, when he says, can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear.
Okay. I said that yes, it is important to maneuver through their system as to try to use the education to your advantage. I also look at it as as a Pan-African perspective. Also, is the intentions of the subject as is this is going to be used for the better good or to bring back to actually put into action and not to use that education to just go work for their corporations. Is this education going to be used to basically to help better us as a people? And then, you know, when you speak to European education, we also got to understand that it is European education, so it's really taught from his perspective and for their perspectives, you know. So it's a lot of, you know, 3 or 4 points that go also with included in that you know, we gotta really look at and unpack and examine and observe, and then go ahead and apply, see which is good and which is not, should be pushed off the table or not. I yield the floor.
That's power. Yes, sir.
I totally agree with you, big brother. I'll say. How about you, James? I would like to hear James' perspective before I go. James?
Thank you, sir. I appreciate all the panelists. I hope everyone can hear me. I'm still kind of getting over whatever this is with everybody going back to school and bringing all their germs into the household. But yeah, this is a subject area that is near and dear to my heart. I kind of agree with the panelists with just one slight addition. The methodology is the key when it comes to education,
Yes. Yep.
because we have to understand culturally we are different. And I give the example of Europeans are objective learners. Book, you give them a tablet, they'll go at it. We are subjective. We learn and respect our elders. And anyone that's been around youth or dealt with education, is our youth failed in the classroom, not due to aptitude or the ability to grasp the subject at hand or subjects. It is, they fail when they don't respect the person that's giving them instruction. That's what we have to take into account. There are different types of learners. And Brother Consu, you touched on it last night, and I definitely appreciate the program. I didn't want to take away from that, but I wanted to let you know personally, I greatly appreciate the format that you're bringing. It's a breath of fresh air to what Team O.S.I.R.I.S is bringing out there. And so I greatly appreciate it. You have raised the bar, sir. But because we, that category of learning their style and their methodology, we don't take into account that we are just culturally different. And best persons I've ever heard speak on this was Dr. Jeremiah Wright, when he talks about subjective learners and objective learners and the different styles of learning. And we're not, I want to put it this way, we're not all the same. We're just different, and that's okay to be different.
That's
So
right.
with that, I yield the mic.
Power, man.
That's a great point.
Well said. Well said.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. You know, that, James, you know how I feel about you, big bro. I hold you in the highest of esteem. And I think it's a plus for you, big bro, to have a nigga like, pardon my French, but we all the same
No,
people.
that's our. We can own it. We can own it.
Okay, but you know, to have a brother like James on the team is a great asset. But before I'm gonna go in on it, but I don't want to go in just yet. D Miller, would you mind rephrasing the question real quick for D Miller, because he wasn't here, and I would like to hear his perspective real quick.
Yeah, D Miller, are you there, King? Are you able to speak? You at liberty? He might be just listening in. He may be working.
Oh, D Miller, are you there? Let us know, because oh, there you go.
Okay.
Okay, he let us know he was there. I guess he.
Yeah, yeah, that's okay, brother. That's
Yeah.
Pardon self. Go
Okay.
ahead and rephrase the question.
Yes, sir. We listened to an excerpt from Dr. Amos Wilson, and he spoke on the discovery of self, understanding the rediscovery of self. And to paraphrase his sentiments, it was really dealing on knowledge, right? And I asked, paradoxically, in the paradox, how important is European/Eurasian education to the African revolution?
Beautiful question. All right, so y'all know I definitely represent the Moors, and or at least I identify myself as a Moor. One thing that I've heard, and I thought that it was really great advice, was from Drew Ali. He said that get a good European education, and I can use you. Now, in my day-to-day life, I've noticed something. I live out here in Phoenix, and one of the largest universities in America is here, ASU. It may actually be the largest. I'm not sure. And what I've noticed at ASU is a whole bunch of foreigners, right? People from the Middle East, people from India, people from Africa, South America, you name it. And what I've noticed is that majority of them have one single intention: to go back home. So, from my vantage point, it makes absolute sense to get a quote-unquote European education, to take those skills, to take that know-how, that knowledge back home and build up what is yours, as far as a nation or territory or a community or what have you. So in the simplest way, yes, it does have a place, and it has a rather important place with regards to the revolution or us rebuilding our areas to further develop our nations, our communities, etc.
Yeah, I could dig it.
Well said, brother.
Was on that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I would like to first say big up the console, for even putting this little panel together and having a show, and the way of minds to do what he do. He's definitely a boss, and I listened to everything he just said. It took about 20. He said things that could pass the time that was about 20 minutes, but I listened to every bit of it, and I took it all in. So brothers, a lot of us spoke since then, so you might not know or remember everything the brother said, but I'm pretty sure you're gonna put this back up so you can rewind it. I agree with Alvin. Alvin is very knowledgeable on many subjects, and as far as this subject go, how important is the things that the cracker. I'm kind of rephrasing it a little bit, but how important is the things of the cracker to us that they teach us? Me personally, I just feel like you take what they give you that you see that's beneficial. But with the knowledge that brothers out here that you might sleep on, like a brother like Alvin or Shear or D Miller or James or Melvin or the other brother on the panel, don't sleep on that, because that's also good wisdom. But as far as the cracker is concerned, we only gonna learn from him what we need to know to make it in his world. But the things that we teach is things that we gonna know to make it in our world. And with that, I yield them. And like I said, man, our share, you went in, D Miller went in, James went in. Yeah, I learned a lot from every single person that spoke. With that, I yield the mic.
Much respect, brother. Edification is key. That's a strong mental tool. And we have to start thinking about edification, because it is a facet of altruism, meaning we give without need of reciprocity. And to sum this up, and the reason why I asked this question, is the educational system works well in a European construct. Now, Europeans have their own tribes. And I said this, you have Germanic tribes, you have Nordic tribes, you have Asiatic tribes. They have their own
Hellenic
mixture of tribes. You had, as a person just mentioned on the panel, an action of that tribe, which was an Hellenization of information due to oppressive thoughts. But let's get it clear. There's only one race, there's the human race, but there are many cultures that encompass the human race. So before we get into existentialism, we have to deal with mentalism, because your mind permeates this existence. Your perception creates inception to conception. That's the normal process of the brain. Usually it's broken down allegorically by the European as knowledge, understanding, and wisdom, as they try to take a linear approach to understanding someone else's culture. Be it all, the European, Eurasian, is very spiritual as well, but about their culture. This is what we underestimate in dealing with a white supremacist, because the white supremacist puts people to task. So he'll take one slave and have that slave pit against the other slave. As a supremacist, creates paradigms for you to argue over. So if you don't maintain your logic throughout this, you suffer from two things. And I'm going to exemplify these two things. I'm going to give a description. Mental health and mental illness. When we hear mental illness, it's a buzzword. It's a combination word, mental illness, right? It has a nomenclature and definition to it. It has a connotation and a denotation. But when we look at the denotation, the root, the etymon of the word, we're looking to the word neurosis. That's also known as psychoneurosis. Now, this consists of minor illnesses, such as phobias, obsessive compulsive disorders, anxiety disorders, and a bunch of others, right? Each and every one of us, if you are a non-white person in your culture, have suffered from one of these. The issue is your tolerance level and your ability to function as you experience these states. All of us have phobias. It could be heights, it could be spiders, anything like that, right? It could be white people. I got a phobia of those guys, right? Those people. Obsessive compulsive. You may clean all the time. You may work, just constantly work. You do something to be obsessive and compulsive to combat your disorder, a phobia. Then you have anxiety disorders, fight or flight, because the imagination takes flight based on the mental indoctrination. And you start thinking about things. Now, when you start to dwell on things, you go into another more serious mental illness, which is psychosis. And that psychosis, they're major illnesses. And that's when your mental state impairs thoughts, perception, and judgment. You'll have delusions, you'll have hallucinations. Now, you may not own up to it, okay, but you experience it. And because of the connotation and denotation of terms that do not belong in our nomenclature, we inherit that stress. Because we're told up is up and down is down from another culture's perspective. In my opinion, we need to hold on to our African perspective so that we can explore the many facets of cultures that we have within the African paradigm. Remember, we were named African by the European and Eurasian. We were named that, but we're much more than that. We're an amalgamation of different cultures that identify with the African paradox. The naming problem was called Romanticism. As the Greco-Romans came in play, along with the combination of Hellenization, they took it upon themselves to usurp a culture and put them in a false matrix. So when you hear a person says, well, I have a degree of knowledge, a 1 degree of knowledge, or I have 2 degrees or 10 degrees of this gnosis, this knowledge, it is very limited. It is based on the ignorance of not knowing self and how self is already imperfectly perfect. We strive to be something we already are. We strive for knowledge that's already within you, right under your nose. You're already perfect. But you're in an imperfect world, and that's why you change form, because this is an imperfect existence. We have to come to grips with that so that we can be progressively constructive and functional in a revolutionary movement. Because a revolutionary can have all the will they want, but no skill, you'll die soon. I posed this yesterday, and I'll say it again for those that missed the show. If you are a supremacist of black ideology, go kill crackers for us. If that's what your calling is, go kill crackers. Why do we call white people crackers? Because they cracked the whip on us to oppress us by instilling fear of loss. They would attack the dominant individuals, break them down so that the lower individuals will not have their own culturistic demagoguery. So we need pragmatic speakers. The word is very powerful. The Caucasian calls it rhetoric, but the word is extremely powerful. This power of speech. In the Bible, it talks of God was the word became flesh. In the European paradigm, God would be logos, the written word that comes from the inspiration of the spoken word within. So the Bible is an inspired book, and it was inspired before it was Hellenized. I want everybody to understand that. Religion existed in a ordered form of spirituality way before racism. Racism and the terms like white and black did not come about until the 1600s, late 1600s. So we were coexisting with our own forms of spiritualities throughout the world. And we accepted that because we coexisted. We did not have a means to want to eliminate one another. So when I hear a person that is non-white want to eliminate a white person, which is pure ideology, its denotation of etymon has nothing to do with a human being. Humans are humans. We have the same organs. We interbreed. We could produce another human. We have the nerve to call each other mulattoes. Well, white people came up with. The European came up with the term mulatto. We didn't need to do that because we were observational of a universal existence. Henceforth, self, that the European calls self. So the European invests in self, which gives the appearance of dominance, because we don't see the investment in this self. We don't see that. We look at a color, a shape, a sound, and a smell and equate that to reality. That's a feeling and that's a perception, but that doesn't make it factual. So in going into the educational system, we have to have mental dexterity. What does that mean? That is established from the physical trinity, which is man, woman, and child, and the passing of historiological data of self from the parent to the child. The child becomes an adolescent. The child then goes to the parent, which would be secondary evidence, to the primary evidence, which is the parents of the parent. So we have primary and secondary evidence in African nomenclature. We just don't call it that. We call it kindred. We call it family, because we're African-centered people. So we have to start investing in the center, the core of why you exist. So we have this moniker called God or Yahweh, or whatever term that's indicative to your adopted culture. You have a right to an adopted culture, but be adept in your adaptation. Adept means being skilled in the Moorish paradigm. Also by the Moors, that's a frame that's coined. And the Moors were not just black. They were Latin, they were European, they were Asian, they were an amalgamation of tribes that subscribed to a nomenclature within that culture system. That doesn't mean it's adverse to yours. That means that you were subject to false objectivity. That's all it means. So we have to focus on the problem, not the people. And it's a mental problem that we suffer from post-trauma that involves slavery. I will say with Alvin, respectfully, Europeans have been slaves at one point by their own people. You have the Serbians that fought Russia recently in modern history. That's just one example. You have the Jewish paradox, where you had Maghreb Jews, Judeans, that battled Russia at one point, the Jewish Holocaust. So it's examples of that because we as human beings will experience alpha beta just out of survival. And this is something that we have to start processing at a more precise level so that we do not infight with our complete paradox. We are mixed and we are continental as Africans due to the oppressive system of raping of cultures and controlling cultures. If I control your resources and your culture, I control your mind because I take you away from who you are. So there's no need for me to be mad at Perry because he's an Hebrew Israelite. If he feels he practices the spiritual aspects of Hebrew in an ordered form to maintain his Israelite center. There's nothing wrong with that because he knows he's what the European calls African. He may be a different African, which he is. There's 13 million square miles in Africa, and each state is a nation state, which means it adopts its own culture. 56 cultures that are governmentally organized, that have subcultures that encompass that population within the nation state. Henceforth, Israelite. So he is dealing with the core, the Israelite, not the Israeli. And that's found indicative in human culture. So that paradigm of chasing the rabbit down that hole, you'll never get to the bottom of that hole. What you'll find out is you'll lose yourself even more and more for trying to find it. My other observation is, we talked about religion, cultural knowledge. We're talking about, of course, education. My question to the panel is this, and I want to frame this properly. In understanding our mental disorder, shall we or should we be harsh on our own people? Should we deal with them in truth, forcing them to accept it? Or do we plant seeds and allow them to search for it? So I'll open the panel to that question.
Can I respond? Okay. Cool. I'm definitely one to believe in planting seeds. Because what happens is people, and there's a proper way to plant a seed. That's another thing. The problem is people try to plant seeds in infertile ground. It's either that or they'll try to place too many seeds in one area and not give it enough water for anything to happen to grow. It's not getting enough sunlight. So if you're just trying to jam-pack, force something to grow, it's not going to grow. Okay? So when you're dealing with people, okay, like for example, let's say I'm dealing with a brother who worships a toothpick, right? He says this toothpick is God, and this toothpick gives him certain laws to follow and all these things, right? So I'm like, okay, and because his belief in this toothpick deity says that the earth is shaped like a square and it's hovering on top of a giant orange, okay? Like real tripped out, okay? Now, how will we approach this guy? The last thing I'm going to do is call him stupid. The last thing I'm going to do is call him crazy. The last thing I'm going to do is call him brainwashed. The first thing I'm going to do is be like, okay, brother, you saying that the earth is shaped like a square and it sits on top of a giant orange. So then ask questions about the methodology. Because now, when you're asking him questions about what methods did he use to come up with that scenario, he'll start teaching himself. Because after a while, he's going to end up going places that he's not going to have answers to in order to come with that equation. So that type of teaching is way more productive than demoralizing this man, demonizing this man, making fun of his belief system, you know, and sort of that. So I think it's way better to plant seeds properly. And I almost got to alter my last statement about European education, because James brought up a good point. I was talking in regards to the information they give. I wasn't really speaking on their teaching methods. Now, the European teaching methods is very different from how black people or people of color would teach people, because we come from a different culture. So the method in which they teach, we might not retain knowledge that way, because we can't relate to how they're saying the words or displaying the words. So that actually would be a level of difference, you know, in regards to the education system, because what a white kid may gravitate to or retain, it might fit him how the current education system is. But how it comes to a black person is from a different culture, a different way of thinking, so that information may not be retained as well. So that's another can of worms that we got to look into. But to answer your current question now, I definitely would say plant the seeds, ask honest questions, not to humiliate the person, but to really try to help him understand what he might be wrong at, you know. And then if he still denies it, I'm just going to do as the scripture says, and I'm going to dust my feet and let it go. Because at that point, you can't, he's just going to believe that the earth sits on top of a giant orange. And you know what? If he's taking care of his family, if he's working, he's providing for his children, I don't need to beat him over the head about that. I don't. It's only when these things affect his life is when I'm going to get more serious about it. Hell, that's all I got to say.
Well said, bro. Well said, man. I take that. I take that in as good knowledge. The floor is open. No particular order.
Yeah, I totally agree with your first statement earlier that you made, but I think we have to understand that certain ground in which you plant seed in has been poisoned from the root. So just like how you would till the ground to aerate the ground and to almost start anew with your foundation, you have to do the same, because the current foundation, the way that it's set up, you plant any seeds, whether one or you completely fill up a spot, the weeds in that ground are going to choke that seed out. So I think you have to till that ground. You're going to have to apply pressure in certain areas, not all the way, but just enough so that you know that that ground is now suitable for seed placement. And we see that in nature when, you know, farmers or, you know, people, you know, till their ground. And I think you have to do the same with the psychology of man, especially the ones that are in our shoes that have dealt with the things that we have dealt with. So psychologically, there has to be sort of a cleansing of the foundation in order for you to place seeds, so those seeds can grow and be effective. There's no need planting seeds knowing that they're not going to survive in the foundation that they're born into.
No question.
That's my piece.
Wow. Yes, sir. I digress. The floor is open to anyone who wants to embellish. If not, I can move on. But
You might have to restate the question.
yes, we had another brother come in, I believe, Lex Vortex. Peace to Brother Lex. The question is, in bringing truth to our people, or what one may deem a truth, and add to the collective of the African Revolution, should we be forceful in teaching our kindred, or should we plant a seed in a less abrasive fashion?
This is Miller L here. I'm gonna make a final comment. You know, I think there's a time and a place for everything. And I think that it takes a very wise person to know the season. So there is a time in which you put pressure on a plant, on a seed, and there's time that you allow for the seed to, you know, kind of do what it's going to do without pressure. So again, if we're gonna think about the truth as a seed, that, you know, there to agriculture and to bring up a seed, and I a person to out that if we're interested in planting a seed, it doesn't just come up on its own. It definitely doesn't come up without attention, right? So that's my final statement. I appreciate you, Brother Consul, for the invitation, and peace to the panel.
Islam, please.
Since we're on this seed analogy, and it's a really good analogy, you do know when you plant seeds in the ground, and they've done experiments on this, and there's been a level of consistency. If you constantly put hateful words and constantly recite it on one plant, and then constantly recite pleasant words on another plant, you'll notice that the other plant will grow kind of messed up. The leaves will be all brown looking and all jacked up with the negativity on top of it. And then the other plant that heard nothing but positive words grows green and big and all that and healthier than the other plant. So what I always say, you gotta have the spirit of love in you when you're addressing individuals. You know, that coming in the spirit of pride is going to destroy you, and it's going to destroy the person you're talking to. You ain't gonna be able to. It's like nobody is trying to hear that when somebody ain't in the right spirit. You know what I'm saying? And if you come with the love, with the true intention of, I'm really trying to help you, I'm not trying to humiliate you, I think that's really the basis of what all this is.
Much appreciated. Um, Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll speak on it. I think that we should, like, plant the seed but be compassionate about it too, because we've all been on a journey. Some things that now, you didn't know that years ago. You didn't know that months ago. You didn't know that decades ago. Some things are real sensitive to people. You don't know everybody's mental state, so you may have to approach individuals on an individual basis. So it may be differently how you can come across to everyone. I'm not a Hebrew, but one of a great story. It's about four rabbis, and you have Rabbi Kibai, and they have a saying in the Hebrew mystery system, Ish Merkaba. They call it entering into the orchard, entering into paradise, parties. And you have these four rabbis who entered into the orchard, which represents the mind state. And only one came back. One came back the way that he left. You had one that had went insane, one had died, and the other, everything that he was before was just completely backwards. So everything's not for everybody, at least on certain levels and stages. So I mean, just you got to be very sensitive in dealing with people, and be compassionate, and even sometimes remember too, what you may hold truthful now, it may also change later too. So.
Well said, brother. Okay. If anyone else is content, then I will continue. I do want to touch on some things. I said I was going to talk about this. Queen Neferka from Team O.S.I.R.I.S, she actually taught me and enlightened me, kind of gave me a different understanding yesterday on intelligence, right? And there are different levels of intelligence. There are 9 intelligences that it's a theory that was created, and it kind of gives relativity to what we suffer from. We suffer from trying to live up to something we already are. We're trying to live up to an ideology or an ideology. That means a study of being ideal under ideal situations. But are we in an ideal environment to even think that an ideology will hold weight when logic is applied to it? When you apply logic in some circles, that would be the voice and the connection to the Most High or God. Logic, because that's that mental thread that helps you reason with the inner voice. You can give that inner voice whatever connotation you choose, even denotation. But what it does, it gives you balance, gives you the ability to see things in a holistic fashion. So logic is very important. Now, of course, I'm using European terms. So in an African paradox of spirituality, it would be a feeling, an inner feeling of peace and serenity to give you confidence to move forward without questioning your own intent. Questioning your own intent brings about fear, doubt, which leads into procrastination, and eventually you give up whatever quest you choose to go in. So let's talk about the types of intelligence. Now, Queen Neferka talked about this yesterday. The naturalist is understanding, right? This is an intelligence, being a naturalist. Most of us have most of these intelligences. So we have a naturalist that talks about understanding living things and reading and nature. Then we have someone who is musically intelligent, discerning sounds, their pitch, tone, rhythm, the timbre, right? Then we have a logical, mathematical intelligent person, which knows how to qualify things, making hypotheses and proving them. Then you have an existential. Now that intelligent person tackles the questions of why we live and why we die, right? Then you have the interpersonal intelligent person, which is sensing people's feelings and motives. So far, I've named these things. Do they apply to you? I bet you're picking 2 or 3 of them that do. I know you've exhibited these traits. Then you have the body kinetic, right? Which is, or kinesinetic, forgive me, which is combining your mind with your body. Kinesiology is the term, the European Eurasian term. You have the linguistic, which is finding the right words to express what you mean. You have the intra, opposed to the interpersonal person, understanding yourself, what you feel, and what you want. And then you have, last but not least, you have the spatial, which is visualizing the world in 3 dimensions. Okay, being able to see that. Now, with these 9 intelligences, you're either nature smart, sound smart, number and reasoning smart, life smart, people smart, body smart, word smart. You could be self-smart, or you could be picture smart. All of these encompass intelligence. So when we're in a foreign system and we're told, no, reading, writing, and arithmetic is intelligent, you've now been demoralized to a structure that does not promote inner spirituality and self-esteem. This is one of the key factors that limits a person that is non-white in achieving things and creates neurosis and psychosis because of that, because you do not see that you are completely perfect. Let me give you an example. I pulled some data on a European who operated in this European system. Okay? And His name is Steve Jobs. Now I'm going to do a timeline. And what I'm reading his timeline. I took some notes and then I typed it down. And I'm going to give you an overview, and then we're going to get into the intricacies. And I'm going to identify those areas of intelligence. Okay? Steve Jobs, right? He was born in 1955. He was born and then adopted. Okay? So as he was born and adopted, he took the moniker of discerning sounds, pitches and tones, because he's a child. So we take on that musical intelligence because we can't formulate words. So remember, when you have your baby son, daughter, or a child in your hands, you notice they coo and they make noises, and we tend to be able to understand that unfathomable language. The child is literally talking to the mother without using the language that would be considered regular language. But the mother knows what the child needs. That is a musical intelligence. They're manipulating sound and action to get their points across. Right? So this is what the intelligence that Steve Jobs had shown in 1955, that we all show on our birthday, at the beginning of mental and physical existence. Then he started tinkering with electronics, started becoming a college dropout. Then he started going spiritual. Well, with electronics, okay? He became inclined. He just knew it was something he liked to do. So in tinkering with the electronics, he became existential, tackling the questions of why we live and why we die. He also exhibited means of being really interpersonal, okay? Understanding people's and feelings and motives. Then Steve Jobs became a college dropout. He dropped out of school. Didn't work out for him because he started seeing the world as being a greater place. It's got to be more to this than this schooling system. So he started becoming spatial, seeing the world in 3 dimensions and not just one-sided. In doing that and opening up his mind, quite naturally, you know what came next? He became spiritual. And in that spiritual, he starts sensing people's feelings and motives. He started using facets of existentialism. Along the way, he became, after having a spiritual experience and an enlightening experience, he started Apple. Is that a coincidence? No.
Yo, still there? Yo, you still there?
I think we temporarily lost him for the moment.
Okay. He probably trying to get back on.
Hey Melvin, try to message Consul.
Yeah, I think he got bumped off.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. I had a technical difficulty there. Brother Melvin, are you there? Where did I drop out at?
You were going right after he started Apple. Are we still live?
Yeah, we're still good.
All right, cool.
Yeah. Okay, right after he started Apple, right?
Right.
So after he started Apple, Steve Jobs was on top of the world. And when I said when he started Apple, he was going through a period of being existential because that was his intelligence that he was exhibiting, because he was tackling and he knew the questions of why we live and why we die. He had it. He had that factor, that it factor. Energy was working for him. But then abruptly he was fired, right? And he went through a period that is called spatial. Once again, he's gone through this twice. He went through it when he dropped out of school, and now he's going through it again. He's seeing the world in 3 dimensions, good and bad now. Everything isn't about always being good. Understanding the swinging of the pendulum that Kabbalist talks about. Swings to the left, it will swing to the right. And now he's going through a period of stick-to-itiveness. So what comes next? He is back. He's back on top because now he recognizes, I'm not going to quit. There's more than one way to my salvation. So he becomes a CEO again. Okay? Now, as a CEO, he is a naturalist because he understands living things and reading and nature. Now he's like, this is just a part of life. He's become an elder. He understands things. Now he's in a zone. But then abruptly, something else happens in this person's life, who I think is remarkable. He starts a tech revolution. So his revolution is fired by his knowledge of self, his ability to express his each individual talents of intelligence. He didn't accept the norm because he realized the norm was a byproduct of the mental. And as he started that revolution, he brought about cancer. Cancer came in his life. So he had periods within that cancer of being bodily kinesthetic or kinesthetic or dealing with kinesiology. So he had to coordinate his mind with his body to hold that body together. He fought, but he lost that fight in 2011. That was the end of his life path. Now I ask this question. Each and every one of us, this European is operating in a European construct. But what he has is what we all have. Intelligence. Each and every one of us has a form of intel. Because we were oppressed and started to repress, we have to gather again our African center in order to permeate African intelligence and think with an African mind and do things with an African mentality so that we maintain our center and core, because there are going to be ups, there are going to be downs. So my purpose today, to follow up from yesterday, was to be a catalyst in telling all of us who are in the struggle as African revolutionaries. We have to maintain consistency, and you have to please yourself before you can please anybody else. If you're not pleased with yourself, it's impossible for you to be of value to African liberation by means of revolution. Because you have to have a sense of self-worth to know I'm too valuable to do this. I'm too valuable to quit. I'm too valuable to explode and be angry. I'm too valuable. You start teaching yourself that it's all about balance, focus, and determination. This is what we have to adopt in a foreign system. to lead us back to our original system. So before I close, I want to open the floor to the panelists. I know a few have left, but I want to open the floor to the panelists to expound and or put philosophy to what I just talked about. So I digress. I open the floor.
Peace, can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
All right. You know, you said a lot, Brother Consul, and I think that this is the crux of you know what kind of makes it difficult. You know what I mean? We're looking to maintain our integrity. We're looking to progress. You know, all at the same time. And normally, when you're maintaining integrity, there's something like not a stagnation, but something that is immovable. You know, it doesn't change. Integrity is something that should remain consistent. But like I said, we want to be progressive. We want to do, you know, what is going to make things better. So I absolutely agree and concur with the idea that it is wonderful to learn. It's wonderful even to learn about and to even engage in other cultures. But the idea of losing yourself in learning or learning about other people's cultures or even engaging in other people's cultures.
Tell it, bro.
Yeah, I think that it is imperative. You know what I mean? That one, we open ourselves up to the idea of learning, always be willing to learn. But at the exact same time, maintain yourself, maintain your self identity, maintain your purpose. And I think that we can balance those two. I think that it is very probable. I think it's possible to do that. And I think that, you know, it is for all of us to um, just to expand our own horizons. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily a good thing to put yourself in a box. It's not a good thing to put others in a box. So as long as you have that mentality and that attitude, it makes perfect sense that you go out into the world, that you learn what is there. But like I said, at the same time, maintain self, maintain purpose, and focus on that, concentrate on that. And I think that you'll be an asset. Regardless on what nation you belong to, community that you belong to, you will absolutely be of value to them if you can balance the two.
Very, man. Thank you, bro. I thank you for that information. I really do. That was great. And before the other person speaks, I just want to speak on what you just said. In the financial world, when you're dealing with explaining new ways of currency and monetization, like Bitcoin, and some of the criticism you're going to endure, you got to have a sense of self-pride to handle a person that tries to demean what you spiritually believe in. That is how character is built, by taking the warrior's way, the hard way. The hard way yields the greatest results. And that was the whole point of putting Steve Jobs out there, because he ultimately had a hard way, even though from the outside in, you may have thought he was a privileged, but he grew up without his natural parents. He was adopted. He quit twice. Once by being fired, two by quitting college. What are you saying for me? So it's very exemplary what you just said. But go ahead, brother O.S.I.R.I.S. I believe you wanted to speak.
Yeah, I think you had said something about using their way in order for us to get back to our way, if I'm not mistaken.
No. I said that because we are logically stuck in a European Eurasian paradigm, and I'm rephrasing for clarity, because we are stuck in that paradigm, we're going to have to maintain our core based on our involvement. We're in a different culture system, regardless of where we like it or not. And we have to find our center of stick-to-itiveness by admitting that we're gifted and talented through it all, in order to actually get back to our center. and not bring in self-defeating feelings. That's generally what I was saying.
And may I ask for clarity on when you say get back to our centers? Like you know, is you speaking like generally, or you speaking for an individual personal center?
Well, it's a balance of both.
Okay.
You have to know where we come from to get to where we're at.
All right.
Because we are ever evolving. If the universe evolves, you evolve.
Right.
We're constantly moving forward. It's a stigmata to believe we're moving backwards. You're going to keep moving forward because time in its classification does not stop. It keeps moving. Okay, so living in a paradox is stagnation and moving backwards. But that's not actually what's going on. It's a perception of it. You're not stagnant. You're moving on. You just have an obstacle or a temporary obstacle that appears to be insurmountable. But if you're focused on your goal because you're solid in your center and you know who you are because of where you come from, that won't stop you. It won't stop you to be in a room full of Caucasians or Europeans or Eurasians. It won't stop you because you got to go to this university. It won't stop you because maybe you're going to drop out and maybe you need to create your own life. It won't stop you. Or your parents are telling you something that isn't healthy. It won't stop you. You see what I'm saying? Because you have a center, a core, which is your ancestry, and now you have where you are. You can see the world in 3 dimensions for what the world really is, and you know where you belong in it. So if someone talks about you, if someone singles you out, if someone isolates you, it does not affect your psyche of self-worth.
All right. I understand. Would you suggest, or you know, maybe I'm suggesting, those of us that are in this intellect community, that we focus on inventing something new as a core or as a goal to move forward. Because I always think about, I'm not gonna say always, but white people come into my thoughts. But I don't really think they was focusing on the caves when they was trying to colonize the rest of the world to create stuff for their descendants. So with that, I think that we need to, create some type of core or goal so we can kind of focus on the descendants and the legacies and the birthrights that we leave behind, instead of so much looking out the rearview window and shit. You know what I'm saying? So what are your thoughts on that?
Most definitely. That's really looking at things from a spatial aspect. That means that you're saying is. So let's move forward collectively and allow each of us to be. Let be. Because collectively, we are trying to seek justice. It would be illogical to think of anything else. Supremacy is an illogical claim. Supremacy is control out of inferiority. To think that you're supreme or you're a master. Because even science doesn't allow for absolutism in anything in life. So if we accept the skin we're in, we accept our spirituality collectively, we can actually deal with being progressive and constructive, which will allow us to enjoy this world. Because your world isn't mine, but we can share our worlds together. But we don't experience the world from the same center because me and you are individually as soul. We have an individual fingerprint in our soul structure. But we share the same spirit, i.e. blood. But we do have an individual soul. So what you bring to the table and what I bring to the table will be like all the stars that create the universe. Each and every one of us is a star. In Kemet, you will see the star on the walls. Those stars were allegorical symbols denoting man and mankind, those of the like. So mankind does not need to be added to or taken from because it exists. It is perfectly imperfect. Life doesn't need to be changed. Your mind does, because life keeps doing what it does. The earth, the sun, the wind, all the elements that encompass this planet is going to do what it does with or without you. Just you existing in the form that you exist is an example of collective Christ consciousness. Because a person used the term Christ don't let the terminology take away your logic base. Because you call something Christ, I can accept it because I may see Christ in another form. The Hellenization and the manipulation of the inception was due to white supremacy. But the inception became a conception. So it was a faction, a facsimile of the actual inception of Christ, which is a conscious feeling. We have never seen Christ. We've never seen a God. But we know inceptually it is something that goes beyond physical observation. It is something that we may be agnostic to, but we know it exists. We just don't know why. But we know in us understanding and accepting that there's some things we will never know. Then we continue to be progressive and constructive with one another and deal with our African centers and those that are of the light, i.e. kindred spirits. And that's powerful what you're putting out there because we don't think like that. We got to get beyond the first three dimensions. Person, places, and things. Once we get by that, what binds person, places, and things? Spirit, a force, adhesion from mass, velocity, and space. Once space is considered time, but we put time in a box conducive to our action. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 1 o'clock. No, it's just time. We gave it the title 1 o'clock. That was just to create order in how we exist and how we produce. But innately, we are a high sentient being that cannot be measured by science alone. It can be observed by science, but it cannot be measured. Science can't answer that question. So it's meant to be left alone. And you're meant to be left unadulterated to find your natural center and your natural way. We still don't know what happens to us. We know that physically we decompose. We move forward into an afterlife. The opposite of birth is death. That's physical. But we know that we have an outer physical existence that binds us all. All humans have it.
What would you consider as something that's tangible that we can kind of say that can bind us all? I mean, I understand you say kindred and blood, you know, also the skin that we are in. Would you also say, you know, practicing Pan-Africanism can be a way of binding us all together by us networking and, you know, creating some type of business,
No,
you know, or something between us so we can have respect or, you know, get things done?
no, it's, you know, a Pan-Africanism, an ism is a mental construct. If it's beneficial for you, so be it. But should it be a norm? No. It's a facet. It helps promote mental connectivity through relativity by taking you back again to your ancestral beginnings. But as you as a descendant, you are carrying time forward. You're moving forward. So you're taking your ancestors and carrying them with you. So a Pan-Africanism is an ism. It's an ideal built upon a structure that's already been established. And that form can change based on what needs to be adapted to. We can't hold on to the norms and beliefs of a 1960 Pan-Africanism. We would have to add new existentialism experiences to the Pan-Africanism because an ism can only balance out another ism. You can't take an ism and bring it into reality. Like people try to bring Charles Darwin's mind into their mind, henceforth Darwinism. So the people after Darwin might have been racist. Darwin may have been racist, but we don't know that. We assume it based on his words. But that doesn't encompass you. So when a person says, yeah, I know what Darwin said, it's an ism. Because now you created your own paradox. You're not dealing in its original form. So Pan-Africanism still has to have Afrocentric facets. To be eccentric is to embellish in that or romanticize by labeling it everything African. Just labeling stuff everything African don't make you African. Wearing a red, black, and green scarf don't make you African. It makes you a construct of people that have an affinity for Africa. That's all it does. But your actions aren't Afrocentric. Your actions aren't Pan-Africanistic.
Well, I mean, yeah, I agree. You know, we definitely need to not be looking like us, like you say, to the '60s. But you know, that's why I had threw out the, you know, a couple examples as far as, you know, maybe that is the new definition of that so-called quote unquote. Just us networking and you know, doing commerce, using, you know, trying to create some type of bartering. You know, everything that we need. I mean, there's plenty of businesses right there in the neighborhoods that we in for everything that we need, and also the internet now. So, you know, I mean, could that also be something tangible, like you said, something that binds us together by just doing business with each other? How about that instead of Pan-Africanism?
I mean, let me put it this way. Because of your intelligence and your gifts, I can only say, bring it to the collective. I can't say whether it's effective or not. Because then I'm instilling my belief on someone else. I can only appreciate your intelligence and take advantage of it collectively. There's no one solution. That was the microcosm of me showing Steve Jobs to get an understanding of the macrocosm. That all of us have our own special way of adding to our gumbo. All of us do. All of us have ingredients to add to this gumbo. So not one person's way is the way. It's a way. When we talk about Taoism in the Tao Te Ching, the Asians will talk about a way. Not a the way, but a way. But your way is part of a collective. We have to allow ourselves to be free, or we mimic our oppressors through repression. No, I think this way is best. Don't you go that way. You come down my way. But there's many roads to a point because we're coming from different directions. If I say everybody meet me in Chicago, everybody not going to come down the same road, but everybody will get to Chicago. So we have to let go of the repressive thought because we mimic our oppressor in repression. We are oppressively repressed. That's a unique situation with non-white people. We repress against the ideology of just being free. So we take on the moniker of the oppressor by attacking a repressionist. It's no need to do that. If you are centered and you know you're centered, then you come and you meet with my center. And that center creates a flower of life. The European would call it the Vesica Pisces. The center of a circle is its beginning. When two circles come together, you have different shapes and forms that are created out of those circles intertwining. Henceforth, the three dimensions of life. So it would be inaccurate and unfair for me to say to you, no, that ain't the way to go, Brother O.S.I.R.I.S. I would say it's very insightful. Let's add to the collective. Let's give birth to terminology that is befitting to our mental state. And let's even recognize the terminology that we use and be happy with that terminology. If somebody says, God is my personal Lord and Savior, I'm not going to get offended. I'm going to be observational. And I'm going to see if they understand that. And if it's collective with me, I don't care how you pray, what you pray. I don't care how you walk, how you talk. If your center is African, then let's go. Let's get it done. That's what I would say, Brother O.S.I.R.I.S. Because I think what you're saying is powerful, but it's not in my position to demean and demoralize it. I'm operating like my oppressor when I do that. I don't need to do that. We're powerful enough to have our own way.
Brother Consul, if I may.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sir. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. I wanted to. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I can hear you.
Yeah, I wanted to address something you said earlier, and Kasu kind of touched on it with the Steve Jobs thing, but you see how in the beginning of the idea's inception, when he partnered with Wozniak and the other guys in the garage. That's the same thing that O.S.I.R.I.S is trying to present as far as like bringing ideas, concepts, and skills together to benefit that collective. But when you label it, then that's when you begin to put it in a box, and then you restrict its ability to grow. You restrict its ability to be anything other than what it's been labeled. So that's and Consul broke down the ism perfectly, because that's exactly what I would have said as far as how it's being constructed. You're talking about an ideology, so when you say Pan Africanism, you're speaking of an ideology from a Pan Africanist, but anyone who knows culture knows that that does not apply to people outside of the U.S. So you're defeating the purpose of being one.
Let me share this quickly, because I know brother James wants to speak. Brother O.S.I.R., great question. I'm so glad you did that, because do you realize the father of Pan-Africanism was Marcus Garvey, right? Do you agree?
I agree.
Did you ever hear Marcus Garvey in his speech say Pan-Africanism? He never said it. He never said, I am a Pan-African. That was a modern term based on the observation and study of Marcus Garvey. So Garveyisms were then born, and henceforth Pan-Africanism. It wasn't him, it was his moniker. So they carried on his moniker through their own creation. That was it. He never said Pan-Africa. He didn't have a need to, because he was the one creating it. He was synthesizing in his mind an ideology for liberation. So he was adding to, not taking from. So in the African spirituality, we talk about the Odu. The Odu is your pot. The pot represents this in African spirituality. And in that pot, you add material things that carry spiritual connotation. And in that pot is a symbolic representation of your mental construct. So the African spiritualist takes a little bit of everything to create a remedy, because we know nothing is absolute. It's going to take bits and pieces of everything called experience to create an understanding. So knowledge and understanding will make you wise to a thing, whatever it is. Whatever you deem it is going to take knowledge and understanding. So I applaud what you're saying. I think it's very effective. I think we do have to come with new terms. But our old terms, we can adopt a terminology to those words. We could create connotations from an original word. There are a lot of connotations from an original word or gesture. I can say this and be like, man, good job. But this also is very derogatory. So there's two double consciousness aspects that are done when I do this or when I do that. There's two sides to that. It's twofold, and it could be eightfold. The archaic people, the ancient people, because they didn't have a modern mind, would put up a lotus flower and say there are many petals to the flower of life. So there are many levels of knowing. It's your wisdom to be able to apply those levels when needed. You have a psychic toolkit, like you have a genetic toolkit. Same thing. It's all about duality and understanding the self and the non-self. If we're going to get to the mental mind state of a true revolutionary, you're going to get to the mental mind state to maintain your revolutionary fight. You have to have a sound mind and a foundation. The foundation is your ancestry, and the adaptation and production is your descendancy. So you're going to build Pan-Africanism different than who did it before you. You use the past markers to add energy and strength to your ingenuity, because you're already perfect. Nothing can be added to you to make you greater than you already are. Nothing. It just can't be knowledge. So I wanted to put that out there before the brother James spoke. I was going to close out, and that was powerful, though, brother O.S.I.R.I.S. Very powerful. Very.
Most definitely. And Brother Consul, you put the period at the end of the sentence. I promise you I won't be long at all. I just wanted to touch on something, Brother O.S.I.R.I.S. You know, we've been kind of building on some things in the back chat. This is what I learned from my experience, is that we spend too much time trying to build with minorities. I'm going to clean that up because I know I mess some people's heads up when I say that. A minority by law is a ward of the state, a dependent. So if someone is mentally a minority, it's difficult to do business with them. And that's regardless of culture. Now, we can give charity to minorities, but we cannot build with minorities. And so I'm saying all that to say this is we mentioned Brother Marcus Garvey, and we know some of the things that he was caught up in that didn't allow him to build what he was trying to build. But as Brother Consul so eloquently put it, he didn't label himself a Pan-Africanist. He didn't coin the term Pan-Africanist. He was not allowed to be put in the box. And the same with Steve Jobs, you know, and we look at minorities as dealing with people of color and, you know, ethnicity, that when he was deterred, and, you know, it's difficult to be fired from an organization that you created, you know, that's a hard pill to swallow, is to be fired by your baby. That's your child is terminating you, and to bounce back and come back and not only do that, but to come back in wholeheartedly and still give an effort while dealing with his condition. And so sometimes we have to close our eyes, our physical eyes, and listen to the words of what the people are saying. I'm gonna say this, and I'm gonna close on this note, that Brother Consul, he mentioned it when he talked about white supremacy. And I call those that claim to be of the same culture as me, but they come with that white supremacist ideology and mentality, I call them white sympathizers. And sometimes we get caught up in someone that shares my pigmentation and thinking that they look like me, then they must be for me. But we have to, until we get to the point to where we can keep our spiritual eyes on what's really going on, close your physical eyes and listen to the words of what these people are saying before we go into a business adventure with them. So with that, I appreciate you, Brother Consul. I appreciate Team O.S.I.R.I.S. and look forward to building with you all in the very, very near future.
Oh, definitely.
Man, you talking bars.
Yeah, that was deep.
Yeah.
We got Brother One Drop, Kufu Makaru, the co-founder of Team O.S.I.R.I.S. He came in a bit late. Did you want to expound, brother, and add some philosophy to the build? Because this is more of a philosophical build anyway. Would you want to add to the collective, brother?
Nah, peace, man. I'm just enjoying the dialogue.
Well, fair enough, brother. I do want to say there were some powerful words said in the last few moments. It's very powerful that the brother James and the brother O.S.I.R.I.S. said, because it is some straight up and down questions, and we don't take time to be sophisticated in our processing of thought. The mind is a very sophisticated entity, because think about it. You can't put the mind in a jar. You can't hold the mind in your hand. So why would you put a mental thought in a mental box? It don't match. There's no logic in that. We create labels because we were taught by our oppressor to. Think about that. The Greco-Roman, when we get to let's talk history now. The Greco-Romans, the Ptolemies, and the Romans themselves romanticized things. That means that they added diction to things. Henceforth, modern day dictionaries, which are books of diction. But the root of the words are sounds. Henceforth, phonics. And they go through phonics and morphology and phonology. When I'm talking a European nomenclature, I'm giving you scientific labels. But it's just like a sound, a sign, a symbol that then gives way to a belief, that then gives way to a norm, that then gives way to a way of doing things socially, that then gives way to artifacts, that then gives way to knowledge. It's the building of a culture. You know, I've said this before, that there are 8 elements to a productive or existing culture. And those elements are symbols, language, and in this order: symbols, language, values of the language and symbols, beliefs of those systems because of the values, then gives ways to norms, then goes into behavioral patterns because you adopt those norms, then you create artifacts of history because of your present behavioral patterns. And after doing that, you create social institutions like churches that become spiritual connections to the beginning of symbols and language. So when we adopt another culture, we have to be knowledgeable of the culture that was forced upon us in order to even get to our center. So we got to be knowledge of a European, Eurasian culture to even realize we're in it. If you don't know where you're at, how do you know where you're going? So if you don't understand the mind of a European and Eurasian, how could you get to being an African-minded person? So that phobia of hate, get away from me. I don't want them in around my circle. I can't say certain things around them. You are destroying your path. You got to go through the European and Eurasian to conquer it. That's like any obstacle in life. So that European mindset is an obstacle. You got to go through it. You got to endure it. You got to have some pressure applied to you so that you can become pristine through that pressure, just like nature creates a diamond. So these human titles are being done because they observe natural acts, natural phenomena, and they give it their own label. So when they saw the diamond and they found out how the diamonds were formed, and it was formed under immense pressure, that was the obstacles. So we got to stay in our African center and deal with things naturally and let things be. James is James. I don't have to say he's an ism or an ist, or he's ick about something, or he's ish about something. He is. What is your center, Brother James? It's African. Okay, now we know that the European taught us what the African is. We know it's over there in that landmass, whatever it is. But we know that landmass is comprised of a whole lot of people that look like us, act like us, and brought customs like us over here. So we tap into that center with an ancestral bond, either through prayer, meditation, research and meditation and prayer. But we find our past. We connect to our past and bring our ancestors back alive because we're not forgetting them. And then we take that knowledge and memory and apply it to self. And now we become the conduit of the past into the future. We become that missing link. We become the living idol. We become Christ that walked and taught and fed the people knowledge, right? Christ came with gnosis, knowledge of self. You are the son of my Father. We are one and the same. I come in the flesh to have a passion for you, and I'm going to endure pain to show you you can do it. Now, I'm not Christian. I'm not Hebrew. I'm not Muslim. However, I can bring the same relative story and get the same knowledge out of it from a different path and apply that to my success without having to go through the labyrinth and conundrum of the mind games. I don't have to do that. So I can listen to a Christian preacher, and if that Christian preacher is holding proper precept to these creations or inceptions, I know that he's putting in good work. But he's putting in good work designed for his own path. In the African spiritual system, it's called divination. In the American adaptation of African spirituality, it would be called a reading. You're giving your life's path. Everyone has their own individual path. That is very, very important, and it is something that we really, really have to focus on. Okay, that is vital. And so in understanding that, it's critical that we observe, but be very mindful of your subjectivity. Observation is fine with a logical mind. Protect your subjectivity because what you're subject to will affect your subconscious and attack your core. So I appreciate the conversation. I open the floor for anyone that wants to close, because I've been wordy, but this is a philosophical conversation. And I hope that people can take applicable steps in this conversation and become successful. A successful African person, or whatever you deem yourself to be. But I open the floor before I close.
Yeah, man, that was powerful knowledge. I'll say this: a lot of times we feel like we have to label things to properly understand them, and it's kind of the difference between what academia represents and what cultures represent. Cultures they see things as they are. They only label them for their ability to identify something that has no name. But academia, see, you catch it. Academia doesn't do that. They only label it because they want to define it. They want to say this is what this is instead of just letting this be what it is. And, that's the conflict you're gonna have between the two. And that's why culture. I always say culture always has that edge over academia because it understands at the finite level, whatever it is, you let it be free. You let it become what it is. You don't take a flower out of the ground and say, "Hey, look, this is a flower," without realizing that you just killed it.
That's
So,
right.
so I think we have to be more conscious and aware of what we try to label, we try to define. Even each other, we label each other. We say, "Oh, he's he's from the hood, he's no good," or he's from the projects, or he's from suburbs. He's got tattoos, he's got this, he's got that. Well, he doesn't have this, he doesn't have that, and we don't realize we're labeling somebody without allowing them to be who they are, and just and leave it at that. So I think that's something we have to be cognizant of and aware of.
Man, that it's a I think it's an Indian or Brahmin proverb that if you observe a flower in its all beauty, I forgot who that was. So you observe a flower in its beauty, you can appreciate its beauty. But once you pull it from its environment, you have just killed that flower. The same thing you just said. And that applies to human beings. That's what the importance of philos is, the study of the mind. Some call philosophy pseudo because of the fact that it's a European perception that it's pseudo. But we are nature and nature is us, and all is mental. Everything about you is mental. And the mental is going to give foundation to your physical. And it's hard to swallow because we want to fight. We want to argue. You can when logic is in place. You can do that. It's educational, it's fruitful. But when it's reckless abandon to destroy and wreck creation, that's what you do. And a lot of us like recreational things. We like to be, that's a bit of wordplay, guys. Okay. But we like recreational things. We love the recreation. We like that kind of thing. So
Yeah, I'll say this about I'll say this really quickly about pseudo. If you didn't catch the last show, T-Ball said pretty much bodied that term. But what I'll add to that is pseudo is always pseudo when it's no longer, when what you're trying to understand is no longer relative. Now, of course, it's plenty of BS. We all acknowledge that. But there's levels of things where unless you're in that culture, unless you're born and raised in that culture, so you understand that whatever it is at its inception, then you can only classify it as pseudo because you don't even belong to that think tank. You don't belong to that culture, so you lack the ability to observe it at its inception. And so that's what we see as pseudo, which is why, like I said yesterday, as of yesterday, the term should be diminished from our vocabulary because it no longer fits in the paradigm that we
saw it to see fit.
And it's funny. I was telling Ngozi this. Shout out to brother Ngozi, who's the founder of Team O.S.I.R.I.S. I was brilliant, brother, and my lifelong brother, 20 plus years. I said, man, Ngozi, you created a colloquial term. You know that? You start using pseudo because you're a pragmatic individual and you're highly intelligent, and you have the ability to motivate people. That attracts people to you. People created pseudo-isms out of your perception. How powerful is that? And Ngozi was quite humble about it. He said, yeah, I'm still going to use it. I said, hell yeah, you should still use it. But the isms need to be identified because that wasn't the original intent when it was used. In this community, it wasn't. Ngozi's intent is not what the outcome became. That's how easy these terms can be shuffled around. And we adhere to a term that may be totally off-centered of where it was supposed to be used, based on your cultural base, not its definition. That's romanticism. The definition was used by people who were controlling at that time. But you have connotations to denotations. The etymon isn't the end-all, be-all of words. Words can be interchanged. You play games with words. That's why it's called rhetoric. Somebody knows how to use words well, they can have your logic all over the place. Have you believing in the tooth fairy because they use their words well. The syntax is awesome. They're pragmatic. Their discourse. Their pragmatic discourse is eloquent. Have you believe in anything. But if you maintain your logic base and stop following men, from the words of Neely Fuller, stop following man. Follow logic. You're a man. Women, men and women are mankind. You're going to fail every time. Don't follow me. I don't want to be nobody's boss and leader. I just want to add to the collective. Because I may mess up. I may act human. Excuse me for acting human. So when I act human on your ass, what's going to happen? Crucifix. Here come the cross. Instead of Jesus staying where he was supposed to be, right? Up here somewhere. When he came down and put this uniform on, called a body, and they said, that's our leader. Once the disciples said that's their leader, he already knew that sealed his fate. Because they singled him out. That's our Savior right there. There go Jesus. There you go. Oh, we get rid of him. He out of here. Because he's embodying something that we can't control. Kill him. So the need to be a controller is your ultimate demise. You sow a seed by planting them and nurturing them. And you bring them up to the same level as you. The food that you eat is you. Because you both come from the same source, the earth. It's the same. It's simple, common sense logic. So that's my take. That's Team O.S.I.R.I.S.'s take on mentalism and the aspects of how to implement it in what would be considered an African revolution, not just the black one, but the African revolution. I do appreciate everyone's participation. I do appreciate the panel for raising the bar. I really do appreciate each and every one of you. I want to shout out to everybody out there that appreciates growth and is not afraid of change. I do appreciate that. That's what we call the Black Flag movement. So with that being said, one love, peace, power, prosperity to everybody, all the non-white people out there. I appreciate you, and we all do. With that being said, we out.